Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. We'll get started in a few minutes, but if you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourselves in the chat box, please do. Thanks for sharing, Anne. I think it is so important, and you have a great point about always benefiting from more knowledge. We should always be learning. Just fixing my lighting. Hi, Mia. Thanks for being here. Yeah, you're gonna learn a little bit about the job of being a sensitivity reader today, so you're definitely in the right place. Yeah. Okay, so it is about 8 p.m. I'll give folks a few more minutes to jump in, but keep putting your stuff in the chat box. Tell us a little bit about yourselves. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started with our announcements. So hi everyone, thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Sam Babiak and I'm the Program Director for the Writers League of Texas. And before we get started with the presentation, I just have a few announcements. So first up, next Thursday at this same time, join us for Ask Us Anything, the Path to Publication. This is going to be a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful Zoom. We're going to be joined by Beth de Guzman and Monique Patterson, just two really incredible publishing professionals. And it is completely free, so you can RSVP on our website. And at the end of my announcements, I'll put some of these links in the chat box. And if you're here and you're thinking about sensitivity reading, you might also be thinking about writing a character whose identity or identities you don't share. So if you are in that boat and you'd like to learn more, come spend 3 hours with Alex Temblador, and she's gonna go through what it takes to write a character whose identity differs from your own. And I'll put a link in the chat box shortly. And we have released our full fall 2021 online classes and special events schedule. We have a ton of free events as well as classes on the craft and business of writing. I truly believe that there's something for everyone in that schedule, and you can find that on our website. And last but not least, we have our Agents and Editors Conference coming up this September 17th through the 19th. At this time, we only have we don't have in-person spots available. I'm sorry, my cat is like playing with the lamp, but we don't have any in-person spots available. We just have virtual all access spots, and you can sign up for those on our website. And these virtual spots also come with a consultation with an agent or an editor. So it's a really great opportunity, and you can still sign up for those. Okay, welcome everyone to WLT Off the Beaten Craft, the ins and outs of sensitivity reading with Shenwei Chang. I'm just gonna introduce our presenter for the night. That is Shenwei Chang. Shenwei Chang is a Taiwanese American writer, blogger, and sensitivity reader. Their undergraduate background is in Asian American studies, and they are currently enrolled as a dual degree program graduate student, studying children's literature and library and information science at Simmons University. They have been working as a freelance sensitivity reader since 2017, and their past clients include both Big Five publishers and indie authors. They will most likely be found haunting their nearest bookstore. So that is it from me, folks. Shenwei, feel free to turn on your camera and mic now, share your screen, and take over. Thank you for being here.
Okay, yeah, share screen. Let's get this technology working. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Oh boy. It's loading. Okay, there we go. You can see it, right?
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, so hello everyone, and welcome to my presentation. Whatever time of day it is where you are, I hope you're hanging in there and taking care of yourselves in these rough times during the pandemic. And thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation. So actually, Sam just covered a lot of this in her introduction for me, so I'm gonna just skip over the parts that I already talked about. But yeah, so my formal education background is in ethnic studies, and so that includes Asian American studies and like Latino studies, Black and African diaspora studies, and so on. And if you've heard about the recent news with the attempts to ban critical race theory in states like Texas, yeah, that's the critical race theory that I'm talking about is actually part of my academic background. And I got my undergrad degree from UT Austin, so I'm a Longhorn with them. Anyway, yeah, I'm currently in Boston at Simmons University. So, and aside from blogging and doing sensitivity reading, I'm also writing to get published. So I share some stuff with the people in the audience, and I know what it's like to be on the creator end, trying to do right by marginalized communities in my own work. Oh, I might have. Okay, here we go. Okay, so to start off, I'm going to give an overview of what exactly sensitivity readers are and what we do. And so sometimes sensitivity readers are called authenticity readers or even cultural consultants or diversity editors, and these terms are more or less interchangeable. So if you see any one of these terms used, they basically mean the same thing. And to put it succinctly, a sensitivity reader is a specialized type of developmental editor who is hired to provide critical feedback on the fictional portrayals of identities or settings that have historically been marginalized within a given society. And the goal is to ensure that they're portraying these aspects of the story accurately and respectfully. And although some people may think of sensitivity readers as fact checkers, that's not really actually the primary role of a sensitivity reader. While part of the feedback they give may involve correcting factual inaccuracies within a story as it relates to their identity or community, the knowledge and skills that a sensitivity reader brings to the table extend beyond that. And moreover, no given sensitivity reader is actually going to know every single fact about their identity or culture or whatever. For example, if you're looking for someone who can tell you like what the kinship systems of Song Dynasty China in the Fujian province, or like you're better off consulting an academic who specializes in that topic than asking a sensitivity reader who happens to be Chinese. So what exactly are the unique skills sensitivity readers bring to the table? Well, first and foremost is their lived experience of their marginalized identity. While as an author, research can provide insight into an experience outside of one's own, and I highly recommend everyone do research, it still has its limits. There are details and nuances about life, whether it's culturally specific habits or rituals or microaggressions that you may come across when interacting with the mainstream society, that these little things make the experiences of marginalized people different from those of the dominant groups. And these differences can span all aspects of life. And so the sensitivity reader can provide the feedback that will help develop your character more and like flesh out their interactions with the world around. However, beyond simply living a particular marginalized identity, sensitivity readers have a contextualized understanding of their marginalization. By that, I mean that they are attuned not only to their individual experiences, but also to the systemic forces that shape their experiences, such as the political and historical factors. They have a deeper understanding of what stereotypes and tropes about their communities exist, as well as why those tropes exist and what ideological functions they serve. And more importantly, they can unpack and explain those issues to writers in a way that's accessible. So when do you need a sensitivity reader? So the most obvious case is when you are writing a character with a marginalized background, or you're featuring a setting in your story that centers a marginalized identity or culture that's outside of your experience. And this includes fantasy settings that are inspired by real world cultures. However, sometimes authors may still hire sensitivity readers for identities or cultures that they do share with a character or setting in question. This happens when they feel that some aspect of the character's identity or experiences may need like a second opinion to fill in any knowledge gaps or uncertainties they have. For example, like if someone is a person of color and they're writing someone with the same racial or ethnic background, but who has a different, say, regional or linguistic or immigration history or background than they do, they may in fact consult a sensitivity reader for that. And I've actually received requests of that nature from people who are also, like I said, I was Taiwanese American in my intro. And so, so I've had Taiwanese American authors come to me to get my opinion on their portrayal of their characters. When in the publishing process should you hire a sensitivity reader? There's not really a single one-size-fits-all answer. Earlier is always better, in my opinion, but there are different factors that affect when you might hire a sensitivity reader, and there are pros and cons to whichever option you go with. So the first option is after acquisition. Most of the sensitivity reading projects I've gotten are for manuscripts that have already been acquired by a publishing house. In those cases, the publisher usually has set aside a budget to cover the expenses of paying the sensitivity reader, and the editor who is working with the author is the one assigned to handle communication between the sensitivity reader and the author. And so they act as the liaison. So the pros is that you can have, with the editor as the go-between, that can kind of reduce some of the anxiety or tension around soliciting critical feedback on your manuscript. And also, since the publisher is paying it, you don't have the out-of-pocket expenses. The cons for soliciting a sensitivity read at this point is that it's relatively late in the publishing process, and which means there are more externally imposed deadlines for your project from your publisher. And so depending on where you are in the post-acquisition stages, like anywhere from your first edit letter to like your first pass pages, you may have to make significant overhauls to your manuscript on tight deadlines, and you may not even be able to change certain aspects of the story, such as like if you have an inherently problematic premise, like that's not gonna work very well. Another option is hiring a sensitivity reader prior to acquisition by a publishing house. This is functionally similar to hiring a sensitivity reader if you are an indie or self-published author, since you do not have the access to the same resources that an author who is getting traditionally published and has signed with a publisher would have. So the pros to this option is that you have more flexibility to make the changes according to the feedback you receive and more time to make those changes. You have more control over the communication between you and the sensitivity reader. So there's probably less room for confusion or games of telephone where you're communicating from secondhand. The cons is that you will have to pay for the sensitivity read out of your own pocket. And some authors may not be able to afford that depending on the sensitivity reader's rates. I will say though that a lot of sensitivity readers are open to negotiation and will offer discounts or accommodations for folks who are unemployed, currently students, or even living in the global South for some of them, if they want to give that kind of accommodation. The other downside is that you are responsible for managing any conflict that arises between you and the sensitivity reader without the editor as the go-between. And so I've personally never had any issues with authors being difficult or belligerent or the two of us getting into a conflict, but you never know what might happen. And some people may have a little bit of social anxiety. I do. And having the liaison might just help keep your peace of mind. So the third option is a smaller scale type of consultation. So if you're in the brainstorming or early draft stage of your project, you can solicit feedback on, say, your initial character design or some of your notes on your world building. And that will help you get a feel for whether you're moving in the right direction with your story. Or maybe if you were better off just completely scrapping the idea. It's a very core level problem. And so this option has similar pros and cons to the previous option I just discussed, but it also has some that are particular to this one. So on the pro side, it costs significantly less than getting a full manuscript read. And then it's also easier to make changes compared to the other ones. And because you're in a developmental stage of your project. The cons is that the feedback will not be as comprehensive as a read for a full manuscript, since you're not going to be able to get any line specific commentary or feedback. Also, if you do decide to keep the aspect of the story that is outside your experience after the consultation, then you'll probably need to hire someone to do a read of the full manuscript later on. And if you're either pre-acquisition or you're publishing as an indie or self-published author, then you'll be paying out of your pocket twice, basically, first for the initial consultation and then for the full read later on. So those three options I just discussed cover pretty much all the cases that I've gotten. I guess one potential other case is the in-between stage where you have an agent, but your manuscript isn't acquired yet by a publishing house. And in that case, usually the agents will not have a budget for sensitivity reads because agents get paid on a commission basis. So until they sell your story, they won't get paid. So they won't have money to help you get a sensitivity read for your story. So how to find a sensitivity reader. There are a number of options for finding a sensitivity reader that aren't just Googling. There are a few places that actually aggregate lists of sensitivity readers online, and some are formally affiliated with a particular site or organization, while others are simply reference lists, which means the person who has collected the information doesn't necessarily vouch for the people in the directory. So to my knowledge, Macmillan and Penguin Random House have official in-house databases that they keep that editors can use to find sensitivity readers, and I added myself to them somewhat recently. And then the other publishers probably have something similar. And this is great for people who are already in the post-acquisition stage where their manuscript has an editor at a publishing house. But for those who do not have that access, there are some that are directories and databases that are publicly available. I've listed a few right here. Disclaimer is that I don't necessarily vouch for everyone who's listed on there. My criteria for adding the list was mostly based on whether or not I saw names that I recognized, and that's it. But yeah, this is a good place. These few that I listed are a good place to start. And second is through Twitter. You'll be surprised what you can find through Twitter. I've gotten paid opportunities through Twitter myself. So I've seen calls for sensitivity readers pass through my timeline all the time, and I'll boost them if I see them. And it never hurts to crowdsource. And many sensitivity readers are active on Twitter. A lot of them are like book bloggers, and will have tweets where they have a description of what they read for and a way to like contact them. And so you can try searching key terms on Twitter to see if you can find anyone who is like kind of advertising their own services. Another way is through referral. So whatever writing and publishing professional connections you have, just make use of those and ask around to see if anyone knows someone. This could be like, it could be an agent, it could be an editor, it could be another writer, it could be a blogger even, because bloggers have our own community and we talk to each other, so we might know like someone who can meet your needs. So yeah, one of my, like when I was first getting started as a sensitivity reader, I did have a few projects that I got because one editor had gotten my information from another editor. So just like word of mouth works a long way. And then another option, not as like, I don't know, conventional, I guess, but through the acknowledgements of a published book. So if you, like a lot of authors will mention who they consulted for like sensitivity reading feedback in their acknowledgements. So if you know of a book with representation that matches or is similar to what you're writing, you can try browsing the acknowledgement sections for people to look up. Though you have to be careful about that because some of the people listed may not be sensitivity readers in an official capacity. They might just be someone the author knows personally. So yeah, that's more like just like a way to cover as many bases as possible. So these next two slides will cover basically advice for people who are planning to hire a sensitivity reader and want some like tips for how to deal with the process and go through it. I'm giving you this information so you can get the most out of your sensitivity read, and also to ensure that you're also doing right by your sensitivity reader, because sensitivity readers are people too, and you want to respect their time and their boundaries. My disclaimer is that, these are my individual opinions. They're informed by my experiences working as a sensitivity reader for 4 years and like seeing what works well and what doesn't work well for me personally. So yeah, to start off, attitude is everything. So if you're already here at this webinar, I'm pretty sure like you're in a good place to start out, but I still need to emphasize the following. So check your own defensiveness. So I know writers can be very protective of their writing and they don't like hearing that they've messed up, but good intentions don't negate harmful impacts. So for that reason, I recommend you don't get too attached to a particular idea you have, because you may get feedback saying that, hey, yikes, this is very problematic. You probably want to change that. Or I strongly suggest that you change that. And remember, you're paying the sensitivity reader to learn from them. So take their feedback to heart. So even if the critiques you receive don't result in a change to that specific manuscript, whatever feedback they give might teach you something that you can apply for your later projects. So to get the best quality feedback, I recommend you match your character's background as closely as possible across all axes of identity when you're looking for a sensitivity reader. So if you are a white writer who is queer and or disabled or something like that, it can be easy to fall into the trap of thinking, oh, hey, I'm queer and disabled, so I think I should be okay writing any queer or disabled character, but that's actually not the case. Race definitely affects the way disabled and queer people of color navigate the world. And white people, even those who are themselves queer and are disabled, can be unaware of their own biases because of the privilege that kind of enshrines them in a bubble. And even within like particular marginalized communities, such as disabled people or queer people, whiteness is still privileged. So in short, intersectionality matters a lot. So second is try to avoid conflicts of interest. So this is maybe a little bit of a contentious point, but I do strongly recommend finding a sensitivity reader who is not a close friend or family member. So there are several reasons for this. Like you may think you can save money, like just like get someone you know well to do your sensitivity read, but if you don't pay them, you're exploiting their labor, even if you have a relationship with them. So this is especially egregious if you're like an adult and asking a teen in your life for sensitivity reading feedback, because of that power dynamic. So you can ask people who are close to you to like read your book for like a general opinion, but for specifically sensitivity reading feedback, I really recommend finding someone else. And yeah, so like someone who has a close relationship with you may that relationship may influence how they approach giving feedback. And so if they like give you a little bit more leeway because you have a relationship with them, that could be bad for your writing because they're not giving you like a full picture or their like a completely honest opinion. So the last for getting quality feedback is asking follow-up questions. So some types of consultations may charge you based on the number of questions you ask or the word count of the feedback that they give. But for a full read of a manuscript, it's standard to get an annotated copy of your manuscript plus a supplementary edit letter that breaks down the sensitivity reader's thoughts even in more detail. So if you feel like you need clarification on any point they've made in the materials that they've submitted to you, it's good to just go back and ask. For if you want another read through of your updated draft after you've like taken into account whatever they've told you, you would have to commission another read. But if you are asking a question about something that they've already told you, then that should be covered by the cost of the original sensitivity read. So as far as schedule is concerned, you should really start looking for a sensitivity reader as early as possible, even if you're not planning to actually commission them just yet. This will just make life easier for you, so you won't be put in a position where you're on like deadline for something and then you don't have someone to look at your manuscript. And once you've found a good match for someone you want to hire, you should really give them at least a month to work on a full-length novel, which is about 50,000 words or more. I've accepted projects in the past that had 2-week turnarounds, and those are not fun. So to put it another way, when you make someone rush with their work, then there's a chance their work won't be as thorough. So you should really give your sensitivity reader time to think and articulate their opinions. As far as payments are concerned, the industry standard is to pay $250 to $500 for a full-length novel as a starting point. Higher word counts and shorter turnaround times will usually cost more. And if you have the budget to pay more than a sensitivity reader's listed rates like on their site, pay them more. Because honestly, like $250 is really low, just in my opinion. And also, if you can pay up front, because people, there are a lot of people who can really use the extra income. So as far as for the next part is privacy and confidentiality. So there are some steps you can take to ensure privacy and confidentiality between you and your sensitivity reader. So it's pretty standard for sensitivity readers to sign a non-disclosure agreement. that basically stipulates the conditions under which they can disclose information about your unpublished manuscript to third parties. So usually it's just like you can't really talk to anyone about it unless you make a condition that says like, if your sensitivity reader wants to consult someone else for a second opinion on something, you can like have a clause that says that they can do that with permission from whoever's in charge of your manuscript, whether it's you or your editor. And then also for the privacy of the sensitivity reader, you should always ask first whether they want to be included in the acknowledgement section of your published work. And if so, by what name and pronouns. So some people may not feel comfortable disclosing certain aspects of their identities, such as if like they're closeted. And others may just not want their name associated with the work because it could be perceived as an endorsement of the work, even if it's not explicitly stated that way. But either way, it's just important to respect the reader's boundaries for that. And last but not least, please provide content and trigger warnings to your sensitivity reader when possible. So all sensitivity readers are going to approach projects with the expectation that they might come across some kind of unintentionally triggering content, like you didn't mean to write something harmful, but you wrote something harmful. But there are also like stories where you as an author already know that you are putting content that is triggering, not necessarily harmful, but is still triggering. And that you should give advance warning for that. So such as like if you have a scene that mentions or describes sexual assault, or there's a character who uses a slur, or you're describing in detail someone having a panic attack or things like that, where like reading that can trigger like distress in your sensitivity reader, just like provide the warnings up front. And this can help the reader determine if they're a good fit for the story, and then also if they are planning to take on your project, that'll just help them mentally prepare for that. So I started my presentation with an overview of what sensitivity readers are, and now I just like to talk a bit about what they are not. So first, they are not a form of censorship. Like there have been certain articles written that are kind of like sensationalizing sensitivity readers and claiming that like sensitivity readers are against free speech or whatever, and that's just not true. So yeah, at the end of the day, you as a writer have the final say in what goes in your manuscript. Well, you plus your editor plus any other person at your publishing house who that your manuscript has to pass through to get published. But the sensitivity reader does not actually have the power to like prevent you from writing or publishing anything. And then secondly, it's not a sensitivity reader is not a replacement for self-awareness. So even like before or after you solicit your sensitivity reading feedback, you should really be thinking critically about your own work on your own time, and like thinking through the implications of your own authorial decisions. So the work of unlearning your biases should be a constant work in progress. It's not just something you compartmentalize for when you're doing your sensitivity reading. And thirdly, sensitivity readers are not a shield from criticism. So one sensitivity reader's feedback represents the opinion of one person of that particular background. So first of all, sensitivity readers are human, and sometimes they may miss things, even when they're trying to do their best work, because no one is omniscient. And even with multiple sensitivity readers to cover more ground, marginalized communities are not a monolith. There will people will disagree on things, and some people will be more sensitive to certain issues than others. So even if your sensitivity readers have given you their best work and have said, yeah, this is all that I've seen that I think would be potentially problematic, there may still be readers of your finished work who find it hurtful, and that's just something you're going to have to accept. And lastly, sensitivity readers are not critique partners or general beta readers. So whether or not they enjoy your story really takes a backseat to the analytical work they're doing on the representation of their identity. So sensitivity readers are not there to validate your writing skill in the other departments. They're concerned with the representation stuff. So this final portion of my presentation is for people who are maybe interested in becoming a sensitivity reader or are just getting started becoming a sensitivity reader. So yeah, for those people who are kind of still on the fence or exploring the option, I would say just know that if you're having doubts like, oh, what if I'm not qualified or whatever, there is no single or universal path to becoming a sensitivity reader. Sensitivity readers come from a variety of backgrounds as far as education it goes. Like I mentioned in my intro that I have a degree in ethnic studies, but that's not like the norm for sensitivity readers. More than like having a degree, what you really just need is analytical skills, research skills, and communication skills to complement whatever knowledge you have from your lived experience of your identity. So if you're confident in those areas, you may be a good fit for the role, and like don't self-reject. And if you are thinking about becoming a sensitivity reader, I do suggest kind of doing a mental cost benefit analysis, because while you do get paid for your work, the work expends a lot of time and energy. And if you just don't have the capacity to carry like the psychological load of processing the harmful or insensitive representation that you might come across, then you're probably not a good fit. And before making any decisions, one way or another, I really recommend talking to people who have a decent amount of experience doing sensitivity reading, so you can kind of get a feel for what like the day-to-day or month-to-month schedule looks like, and whether you can handle the workload, or if like for tips for how to approach the work. And so for those who are actually taking their first steps towards becoming a sensitivity reader and need a little bit of help getting started, I definitely recommend taking a look at the websites and profiles of established sensitivity readers to kind of gauge what kind of information you should or can include on your own website or profile. I actually have like just linked a bunch of people to my own website to help them get started, and just like don't copy paste, just use other people's stuff as a guide. And so once you've said that, okay, I'm going to be a sensitivity reader, own it, carry yourself with confidence, market yourself, and don't undersell yourself. Like, it can be hard to like approach the like negotiating higher for if someone's asking for something that's like a bit rushed, or it's like really, really high word count. Just like tell yourself, hey, you're worth getting paid what you're worth, and ask. And the worst that they can say is no, and then you have the option of either accepting or rejecting. And then also just know that your skills are valuable and your work is important. And so even though there are people who are pearl clutching about censorship, you're doing good. And then also get to know your limits and set boundaries for yourself. And I mean this in more than one sense. So if there are certain aspects of your identity or community that you feel less qualified to give feedback on, you should communicate that to the prospective client, so you don't create extra work for yourself doing like research or end up providing less than satisfactory feedback, because the end goal is to really have a story that really accounts for all the nuances and all the sensitive aspects of that identity or community or whatever. So if you if you see that something else about the project just isn't for you because it'll be too triggering, or if it'll be a drag to work on, it's okay to pass and let someone else take the work. So yeah, you should always plan ahead and be flexible, because there isn't really a set amount of time you're going to be spending on any given project. It really varies, and even 2 stories with the same word count can take a vastly different amount of time. Like, just based on my own work, I've had some projects where my feedback is just like 1-page double-spaced, so about 500 words. But I've also had some that are where I've written like 3,000 words, and that's a lot. And so you really have to have the margin built into your schedule in case you have to write up a lot of stuff for your feedback. And then lastly, get a second opinion if you're not sure. So like you may realize while you're reading, hey, there's this one issue with this work that I would like to you'd like to talk about, but you don't necessarily have the level of expertise you want to be able to address it adequately. You can consult someone else. I have sometimes like asked my dad or my older sister for their opinions on things like relating to like Taiwanese culture or language or stuff like that. And so like if you have like a non-disclosure agreement, then you have to go ask, hey, like can I talk to this person about the project to get feedback to help write up my sensitivity reading feedback. So no matter which of the two groups you fall into, prioritize your mental health. It's tough work, and if you can avoid hurting yourself, protect your time and your energy in whatever ways possible. That can mean turning down an opportunity or taking breaks or asking for an extension on the deadline. And that concludes my presentation. So if you have any questions, you can ask now, or you can email me. And I have a life, so I won't necessarily respond right away, but I'll try to answer any questions I get. Thanks again for listening to my presentation.
Thanks so much, Shenwei. That was such an informative presentation. I learned so much. So we can get started with the Q&A session now. To our audience, if you have any lingering questions, please add them to the Q&A, and we'll get to as many as we can. Yeah, so let's get started. First up, from Virginia, what's an example of a core level problem that would lead to a suggestion to scrap the idea?
Okay, I'm trying to think of if there's an example of something Oh, I know. Like there was a story several years ago where it was like the central theme of the story was, it's not a project I worked on. It was a book that was published. I saw, and like the central theme was racism, and it was like one where it like where the main character is like white, and then she's like traveling to and gets like, I guess like ends up like in some kind of like accident that leaves her stranded in the territory of these non-white peoples in the fantasy land that the book is set in. And so like, so she's white and these people are not white, and like and the premise of the book is that her like people are like a part of an advanced civilization, and the people that she's forced to like survive among are like these barbaric savages. And like that premise is just inherently super racist and colonialist, and like I don't know why that book got published, or actually I do know, it's because publishing is kind of racist. But yeah, that's the kind of thing that I'm thinking of when I say, oh, the premise is inherently problematic.
Thank you so much for that. That was a great example. Okay, so someone asked, would you recommend getting more than one sensitivity reader for more perspective?
Honestly, just as someone who has read so much stuff that like I was just like, why did nobody catch this? Like I would err on the side of like hiring more sensitivity readers, but like honestly, from a practical standpoint, usually publishers will only have a budget for probably 1 or 2 at most. So you're gonna have to take into consideration your own financial situation for that. And also, if you do solicit feedback, I feel like for more than one person for the same issue, you should do one first, and then if you think that one has only answered some of your questions, you want more, if you want more feedback, then you can go commission someone else.
Okay, next question. What does a typical report look like from a sensitivity reader? Is it a few pages, an outline, etc.?
This varies a bit based on the sensitivity reader. I personally like to really organize my feedback into sections with headings on like the general topic that I'm talking about, and then break it out into either subsections or paragraphs elaborating on the issues that I see, and as organized as possible. Though I don't know, I haven't actually really seen what other sensitivity readers provide to their clients, but yeah, it just depends. But like ideally, like I think it's pretty standard to give at least a page of feedback.
Thank you. So the next question. If I have Asian, Black, and Latinx characters in a book, will I need a reader for every culture?
Ideally, yes, but it's also worth mentioning that there are people who are all three of those things, because people can be, because race and like you can be Afro Latinx and you can also be like mixed race, Black and Asian or whatever, all that. So yeah, like if you don't really have the budget for it though, then maybe you should rethink including all those different things and just focus on one.
Yeah, thank you. Next question. I would like to hire a few sensitivity readers as much as my budget allows, since I'm in the early stages and covering this myself. And I'm wondering how I might approach conflicting recommendations from different readers.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, I think she's asking like if she does get several sensitivity readers and let's say they all come back to her with like differing opinions on like specific things in the book, how would she approach like figuring out who is right or like which route would be the best route to take?
That's actually an interesting question, because like I work on the sensitivity reader side, and I haven't actually been in a situation where I'm soliciting feedback from people myself. So I don't know what it's like to like get like mixed feedback, but honestly, like just speaking from experience, I would rather err on the side of safety. So if someone says, hey, I feel like this is pretty problematic, and someone else says, I don't really like, or they don't like, they don't have as strong of an opinion, I would err on the side of like going with the one who's like, oh yeah, please change this, versus someone who's saying, okay, I'm gonna be okay with that, like that.
That's a great point. Thank you. Okay, next up. Do you think it is best to ask sensitivity readers about areas of concern or let them do a cold read and see what they identify as problematic?
So usually when I'm like in like the talking to the editor or the author stage of like figuring out whether I want to take on the project, I ask for them to like kind of describe the project itself, and then like whatever areas that they think they want me to focus on. But and I'll keep that in mind while I'm doing the work. But also just like if I see something, I'll say something, even if it's not something that's specified by the person who has hired.
Thank you. Okay. A friend who's been a great help to me is a psychiatrist dealing with family violence. He's retiring, and I've suggested he do consulting on novels. Any suggestions for how he can start?
I think it depends on what kind of consulting he's doing, because being someone who is a psychiatrist who advises or counsels people who are dealing with like domestic violence or things is still different from being someone who has actually experienced domestic violence or family violence yourself. And so like what kind of feedback are people going to consult him for? Are they trying to consult him on how to like portray a character who is dealing with violence, or is it like you're getting his opinion on what a character who is himself like a counselor or psychiatrist would say or do in a situation when they're counseling someone?
That's
because those are two very different things.
Yeah.
So because in the latter case, that would be like more like a fact checking kind of consultation than a sensitivity read.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. Next question. I would think that having more sensitivity readers would benefit the work itself. Is it proper to ask for a blurb from the sensitivity readers if they are okay with the idea?
In my experience, that's not really a thing that's done. Just because like as a sensitivity reader, it's like we're very cautious about being like kind of weaponized by authors against anyone who criticizes their work. So when you ask someone for a blurb, you're basically asking someone to put their like professional reputation on the line for your work. And they don't even get to see the final version until it's out, and they don't even know what changes you've made. So personally, I would say don't ask them to blurb it.
Thank you. Okay, next question. If you're asking for general comments on a project, not a finished work, what would be a reasonable rate?
I haven't done a ton of these kinds of projects, but for those, if it's like if it's like mostly like a few questions that need to be answered, or if the information you're providing is very basic, like just like a profile and like an outline, I would probably charge between 50 and 100 for that.
Awesome, thank you. Next question, is it common that editors/publishers will seek out sensitivity readers? Is this standard these days? And how do they decide which books need sensitivity readers and which don't?
Yeah, most of the projects I get are the communications are initiated by the editor who's working on the book. And as for how they decide like which projects they're going to set aside a budget for sensitivity for readers for, I honestly don't know. That would be something you'd have to ask editors who do work at like publishing companies. And I'm sure it probably varies from company to company and from editor to editor or from imprint to imprint, like because publishing is pretty heterogeneous, and so like there are some like editors who may not care at all and just say like you can write whatever you want and we don't care if you write something super offensive, and whereas others may be like, I really want to get sensitivity readers for this and this. So yeah, that's probably not the best question to ask me. You should really try asking editors who are working at publishing houses for that.
Thank you. Okay, I think we'll take a few more questions. It looks like the audience has so many questions tonight, so we'll try to get to as many as we can. But yeah, next question. What do you think is the best kind of research reading writers should do to prepare themselves to write a less problematic book?
So I remember there was actually a resource on Tumblr that was like, I can't remember what it was called. But it was a resource for people who were writing outside of their experience, and they had a bunch of different like moderators from different backgrounds who kind of provided little like guides, which are like it's not going to be comprehensive, but it's like a basic guide to approaching certain characters or certain situations involving certain characters. That and I feel like it might have been something called like writing outside the lines, but I could be wrong. But yeah, and then just like there are actually quite a few like publications from, or like whether it's articles, like just like more general articles for lay people, or even if you do have access to an academic library, you can look up academic research on like just like various microaggressions and things like that. Like a lot of people have talked about different kinds of common microaggressions you experience as XYZ identity, or like just like guides to like, or for if you're like writing a queer character, there are lots of guides out there that's like, oh, what's the best way to talk to or write about a non-binary person respectfully. And like there's a lot of resources on the internet for that don't cost any money.
Yeah, And I will mention, we do have a class coming up that does cost money. But if you're
there are people who offer like workshops and such, and like and seminars that will like explicitly like teach you that stuff. Like I know there's one that's by is it Nisi Shaw, I think, who has one. It's called like Writing the Other. I think it's pretty well known within the writing sphere. But yeah, there are seminars out there that can help you with that.
Awesome, thank you. So I think that is it for tonight. Thank you so much, Shenwei, for your presentation and for taking on all of these questions. I know that I learned a lot and our audience has learned a lot, and we're so grateful. So yeah, to everyone here, thank you so much for joining us. Check out our website for more information. This will be on our YouTube channel if you wanna go back and listen and take more notes, because there was a lot to learn today. But yeah, have a great night, everyone.
This was my first time giving a presentation like this, so I'm happy that it went well.
Yeah, look at all these great comments. So good. Thanks so much for being here.